Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your erstwhile host, MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about Dave Meltzer. And a lot of people not a big fan of Dave Meltzer. But my question is it even his fault? Is it Dave Meltzer's fault that people pay attention to his match ratings so much? There was several things that have come out. Al Snow went on an absolute rant about Dave Meltzer. We're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about Dave Meltzer on Chris Van Vliet. He went on Chris Van Vliet's show to talk about his match ratings. And then an article came out on No DQ on June 25th that says that Dave Meltzer is a tumor on the wrestling business. While it warms my heart that so many people are now starting to come out so strongly against Dave, I begin to question whether it's even Dave's fault at this point. There is a lot of history behind this, a lot of which that will require me to do an extensive amount of research. So we're just going to say Meltzer's been around for a really long time. All right. Since he's been around for a really long time, he's made quite a few friends in this business. Due to the fact that he made friends in the business, he became a bit of an expert, through talking to guys like Conan and Cornette and Jericho and Benoit and all these various guys who've been in the business who feed Meltzer information and who read his dirt sheet, the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And they've been doing it for 40 years. So when you have people who are joining your program, I guess you could say, then you tend to gain some respect. So over time, the audience felt like they were more educated, having listened to Dave Meltzer. And then he became a tastemaker, meaning that he can make or break somebody. Meltzer could destroy you in the newsletter, and then all of the smarks will hate you. He could praise you in the newsletter, and then all of the smarks will love you. And through that, we ended up getting some really substantial pushes from individuals and, guys like CM Punk, guys like Bryan Danielson. The rise of New Japan in the United States and Japanese pro wrestling in general in the United States is because of Dave Meltzer. AEW became a big thing largely because Tony Khan was a fan of Dave Meltzer. But Meltzer is just a fan like you and me who got into the business on a journalistic side, at least what he considers to be journalistic, gives his opinions, talks to people sometimes, does research sometimes. I don't think he asked to be in the position that he's in. But now that he is in this position, he kind of has to deal with the slings and the arrows that comes with being the top wrestling tastemaker, the kingmaker, if you will, in the wrestling business. But I'm not sure that it's something he asked for. Now, he did an interview with Chris Van Vliet where he tried to explain how he rates his matches. Now, this has been something that people have complained about time and time again. I've told people not to care. They absolutely refuse to stop paying attention to the star ratings of Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. There was somebody who recently on Twitter talked about how many stars Dynamite has compared to the 30 years of Monday Night Raw. So this is from the account OTRS Central. I don't know who this person is, but they says the number of 5-star matches for wrestling TV shows in history, according to Dave Meltzer. WWE Raw 1993 to 2023, 0. SmackDown 1999 to 2023, 0. AEW Dynamite 2019 to 2023, 9. Apparently, in less than 4 years, AEW has figured out the formula that WWE couldn't over 30 years. What a joke. Again, this is something I've asked people not to harp on, but it is a glaring situation. You mean to tell me that there has never been a WWE match on television that has not reached the level of, some mid-card match on Dynamite? I don't know how to argue that point. Should I go through the list of televised matches that probably should have gotten a quote-unquote 5-star rating? I'm not going to do that because I don't, for starters, I don't care enough. Secondly, I'm not about to sit here and write down every single wrestling match that has happened on Raw. I can tell you some really good ones. I can tell you Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle had a hell of a Iron Man match on Raw. I can tell you that the Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle match was a hell of a match on Raw. Shawn Michaels and John Cena had an hour-long match on Raw a couple of years ago. There's a couple of matches that could have been on Monday Night Raw that you could have theoretically called a 5-star match, but they didn't get a 5 stars. So what? In any event, Meltzer was asked by Chris Van Vliet, and I want to give Chris Van Vliet some credit because he asked a tough question. He asked Dave Meltzer 2 questions. One, how does he rate a match? We're going to listen to Meltzer's answer. And then the second is whether he actually just prefers the New Japan / AEW style over the WWE style. And I think we should be able to glean what Meltzer likes out of wrestling from these two things, at least for the most part. But of course, before we go into this, it should be noted that Meltzer is not consistent. He's going to try to babyface himself in these situations. But here's his answer to how he rates matches.
I want to talk about your rating system because obviously ratings in wrestling are subjective, but what goes into rating a match for you?
I just watch the match, and when it's over, it's kind of like, what did they accomplish? Did it look good? Did the crowd get off on it? I mean, sometimes the crowd will get off on it because the two personalities are so strong. If you start the match and the crowd's going crazy for the ring entrance, and that's the hottest part of the match, and how great was the match really? Even if the match is much hotter than a match that starts at 0 and you build it up to a level in the entire match, build. The most successful matches, you start at this point, you build, and you peak at the finish. If you do a lot of unique, cool things, do things out of the pattern, if you're expecting something and then they do something different and go, oh my God, if they can do that real well, like surprise the audience in a good way where they react. I like that rather than just pattern.
All right. So that's part of his answer. Okay. He's basically saying that you build a match throughout the match, but you don't count the entrances, which of course is a WWE thing. There has been a couple of stories that have floated around about people being back in the days of the territories where Vince would bring in the WWF superstars or whatever. And what would happen is people would be very excited for the entrances, but they would be very quiet for the matches. And then you would have maybe the local territory would come in and people would be incredibly hot for the match. But then you would find out over time that people would be more interested in the WWE product, and therefore they will sell more tickets later on. And there will be a lack of understanding of how that could be because nobody cares about the matches. They did care about the pomp and the circumstance and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's maybe one of our links in the chain, is that Meltzer is actually looking at the match itself. He's overanalyzing the match itself, which is his prerogative, of course. Now, we're going to listen to him be asked a question about New Japan and WWE, which I think is going to be pretty glaring in terms of how he views wrestling matches.
Do you not like the style of WWE matches versus New Japan?
With New Japan, the wrestlers are technically so much better, and they're also better at building the perfect time for the finishes.
Well, they wrestle a very different style, right?
And they do a lot of cross-ups where you think you know where they're going, and then they're not. They take you and they twist you. And with WWE, it is different in the sense that it's built around repetitiveness and teaching the audience to pop for certain moves and then doing them. And in Japan, it certainly exists, but there is a lot more thought to going that one step deeper of this is where we're going and they're about to pop for this, so we're going to do this. And then they're going to pop even bigger.
So I don't know how true that is. I'm sitting here listening, like WWE definitely operates off patterns, and they do definitely teach the audience what they should expect the finish to be, or expect a finish to be upcoming at some point soon. That's definitely how wrestling promotions work, is they definitely teach their audience about finishers and different things like that. Or you end up in a situation like Bryan Danielson and Kazuchika Okada, where nobody expected that to be the finish. And then when it was the finish, everybody was like, oh, okay, well, yay, we liked it, I guess. As opposed to, teasing a big move and then doing the big move and then getting the win. But he's also talking about psychology, the different psychology of working a match, the King's Road style of you stack a bunch of big moves on top of each other. And then, one of those big moves is going to be the finish, Look, that's fine. Again, it's his opinion. I can tell you that there's been plenty of WWE matches that did exactly what he says. They still didn't get 5 stars. There have been matches where the crowd has been hot throughout the entire match. They still didn't get 5 stars. There have been, now, by saying that, oh yeah, people will pop because of the personalities, and that would be Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and various WWE main event matches where people are more interested in the story and the people involved than technically the match itself, which is fine. But by setting that as sort of the standard, that those matches that are not about personality, not about entrances, all about, not about the pomp and circumstance, but about the technicality and the psychology of it. Well, at that point, you really get to a point where, so how come it's always the same main event guys who gets, because typically speaking, if we're looking at just the matches, like just the match and nothing else, like we don't care about the personalities involved, we don't care about any of that stuff, but did the match peak at the right time, which most matches typically do peak at the right time, and that's one of the basic things about wrestling is you hit a big move and it's over, and therefore you have peaked at the right time. I mean, you could be in the mid card of AEW and peak at the right time, when to end the match. Of course, sometimes that typically doesn't happen, and then they get 5 stars. They'll hit the biggest move they got in the entire match. The person will kick out. The match will continue for another 4 minutes, and then the match will end with a move that wasn't nearly as big, on a pop that wasn't nearly as big, and the match will still get 5 stars. So, again, it's his prerogative. But he is the kingmaker. He's the guy that everybody's looking forward to. Hey, what do you think about this match, Dave? And then he's expected to give his very educated expert opinion on this. And then people get angry at him when the expert opinion isn't the same as what they would believe. But then, there are people who question whether he is even an expert. And this is Al Snow. This is where Al Snow comes in. Because now I want to listen to Al Snow. He did a show called Lions, Tigers, Bears, and Head. It is on the Vince Russo podcast network or whatever. And he's going to sort of lambast Dave Meltzer a little bit. So let's listen to a little of what Al Snow has to say.
I honestly, again, the sad thing is, the really disappointing thing is, the frustrating, because I'm still trying to make a living out of this business like a lunatic. I don't know what the hell I'm thinking. I really don't, because he really is like a cult leader. Like he has got everyone so thoroughly convinced that he, again, keep in mind, number one, he can say his opinion. I don't give 2 shits about what he says. And if people listen to him, good for you. Make a living. Be successful. Go. Your candle burning dimmer ain't going to make mine burn brighter. Okay. I have nothing against Dave Meltzer. My problem is that everyone within the wrestling business now subscribe to this opinion because it's one that he's predicated for the last 30 years, and everyone has just now bought on. They just accept it as, well, that's what Dave says. So it's coming from a place where a person, no matter how well informed Dave Meltzer is, and he's incredibly well informed. Okay, I don't care how much wealth of information you have. You can have limitless amounts of information on any particular topic. Name one. If you don't have a commensurate amount of experience, you have no real knowledge. And this man has no real knowledge of the wrestling business because he's never done it. Now, if Vince McMahon, I swear to you, on my grandmother who might have tripped over the cord at any minute, okay, I swear to you, if Vince McMahon stated this same thing, I'd go, oh shit, he might be right. You know why? Because this guy, he's done it. He has done it. And not just he has done it, his father had done it. And not just his father had done it, his grandfather had done it. Do you follow? And so therefore, I would assume Vince McMahon might actually really have some actual knowledge about what he's talking about. The reason I am completely 100% discrediting this ridiculous opinion, because this opinion is worth what it costs to get, which is nothing. The reason I am discrediting this is because of the fact that its source material comes directly out of the mouth of a person who has never once done this inside the wrestling business. He has been on the peripheral from the beginning as a fan, has never been in it and done it for a living.
Now, that was about about 2 minutes uninterrupted. So we're going to go back to that. But this is where I bring up how much other people feeding Meltzer information and over the years basically solidifying Meltzer, guys like Jim Cornette who has done it, guys like Conan who has done it, other various wrestlers who have done it, have been feeding Meltzer information, teaching him how certain things work. And so this is kind of where Meltzer gets his bona fides on his opinion. His opinion is a very educated wrestling fan who's been watching for 30 or 40 years, maybe even longer, who's actually talks to various people in the business, people who are very knowledgeable about things about history and match and psychology, etc. And a lot of them have talked to Meltzer over the years, and they've told him certain things, and they've walked him through these matches, and they used to be really good friends and all this kind of stuff. And now Meltzer is sitting atop the dung heap as, you know, the king of the hill. And now people are sitting back looking at themselves saying, oh my goodness, what have we created? Why is Dave Meltzer king shit all over the wrestling business when he's never done it? Well, a lot of it is due to the fans. A lot of it is also due to the wrestlers, which we will talk about momentarily. We're going to go back to something that made us all laugh when it occurred. I'm talking about Britt Baker, of course, saying that she hopes Dave likes the match when she bled all over the place with Thunder Rosa. But let's go back to Al Snow. Let him finish his thought.
And unfortunately, those that are now in it and are attempting to do it for a living subscribe to this and ascribe to this opinion.
Why is that?
Where they will
why is that? Why?
Because he carries more sway and influence now than gate receipts do.
Why?
Because the performers no longer do it for a living. When they first break in, they are no longer where they broke in and they literally came into a business. They were surrounded by other fellow performers who literally had to survive based on what the attendance was. And that's why they kept everything so protected, because they knew if they destroyed the illusion at any moment, it would hurt the attendance at the events and therefore hurt their way of being able to make a living and feed their family, pay for their homes, their cars, their insurance, etc. So they did everything they could to protect it at all costs because it was so absolutely valuable that everyone be allowed to buy into and believe in the illusion of what was taking place. And this ridiculous idea that just recently in the last 2 decades or 3 decades that general public came aware, it became a clearly known fact that wrestling was a worked sporting event, meaning that the outcome was predetermined, is absurd. We've discussed this. And then the whole, to expose his lack of knowledge and understanding of the very topic he's espousing his opinion on to expose that fact when he went into the companies that got hot were companies that he liked as a fan. Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, yeah, it got hot in that bubble. It didn't get hot like companies have done over decades where they have drawn the casual audience.
All right, so that's a very good point from Al Snow. I will push back a little bit because I believe in being somewhat fair, even though I don't like Dave Meltzer. PWG, I don't think wants to be a mainstream product. Most of the territories were hot within that territory, you know. So you could say Mid-South Wrestling was very, very hot in the areas that it serviced. You could say Jim Crockett Promotions was very, very hot in the areas that it serviced. Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, I believe, is Southern California and is not really looking to go national. So, yes, so in Southern California, it is a top promotion. But that was the goal. That was the mission statement of PWG, was to be a top wrestling promotion in Southern California. And and it catered to Dave Meltzer's tastes in terms of pro wrestling. And in doing so, he was able to uplift the promotion and make it bigger than it normally would have been, and had people who normally wouldn't care about that sort of thing interested in it. And it's very unfortunate, but it's true.
Oh no, I almost didn't watch that.
So to couple what Al Snow was saying, to gotta give some credence to it. It's one of the biggest surprises was in March 2021 after the bloodbath between Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. Britt Baker, they did a backstage thing in which Tony Khan fawned over Britt Baker, telling her how this match was one of the best matches he's ever seen, is one of the best matches of the year, and all this kind of stuff. And she's very like, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, she gets a standing ovation when she goes to the back. Oh, yes, thank you. And then when she's in the quiet room, getting, I believe it was thumbtacks removed from her back, she says this.
Maybe Meltzer will like
It's a 5
it. Let's fucking do it. I already told you that's my goal.
5 stars. I already mixed it up.
Get on.
5 stars from Dave Meltzer is her goal. So Al Snow wasn't wrong. You have a lot of wrestlers that for now their goal is to get 5 stars from Dave Meltzer, not to please their boss. Again, after this match, Tony Khan is blowing smoke up her ass about how great she is and how great this match is and how great this show was. And she's like, yeah, just kind of poo-pooing it. But when in those quiet moments, as she's having thumbtacks removed from her spine, her real goal is to please Dave Meltzer, which is absolute. It's absolute craziness to me. But I don't think Meltzer asked for that. You know, like it put a lot of pressure on him politically to give that match 5 stars. And I don't think he did it. I think he gave him, like, if I remember correctly, he gave him like 4.25 or 4.75 or something like that. It was a pretty high rating for a women's match, but he didn't go the full 5. And she was pretty disappointed that she didn't get a 5-star match. But so people care so much about Meltzer's opinion. Not entirely sure why. I want to let Al Snow finish his point, though, because he had some more stuff he had to say.
And the reason WWE is no different when it was WWF in the 80s, when it was WWE in the late 90s and early 2000s, the reason we made money, the reason that we drew those amazing numbers, WCW, same thing. When they were on TBS in the late 70s and the early 80s, they were hot. They drew money. They were the first national promotion. North Carolina, the Crockett promotion, when it got hot, you know what I mean? The reason that it drew money was because it drew casual fans. He literally has the same access to the same things we do, which is called YouTube. Go back and watch those videos. Don't watch the wrestlers, watch the audience. And there are tapes of audiences where the buildings aren't filled. And then there are tapes of audiences where the place is packed. In 1961, I think was the year when they ran Kaminsky Park in Chicago with Pat O'Connor and Buddy Rogers on top, and they drew 42,000 fans. You're telling me that promotion wasn't hot? And that it was only filled with just wrestling fans, not casual fans too? The notion is insane.
So we all know that a lot of Meltzer's, his supporters have sort of poo-pooed the idea of the casual fans and that there are no more casual fans. But I'll spare you the rest of Al Snow's rant. You can listen to it on YouTube if you want. So an article came out on June 25th by a guy named Sean Green on NoDQ.com. And it says, why Dave Meltzer is a tumor in the wrestling business. And it says, is it me or every other day on Facebook, Twitter, online, and on TV, Dark Side of the Ring, we see Dave Meltzer adding his 2 cents. But usually he is just stirring the pot. Granted, I do like reading his evaluation of shows and seeing how many stars he gives matches. But the moment he starts talking about the backstage, his mouth becomes a cesspool of negativity. Who broke the story about what was going on during Brawl Out? He didn't start it. He sure as hell escalated it. Aside from the news he is reporting, Meltzer makes his hay on telling everyone his opinion on what match is best. He influences what you watch, how you should feel about performers, performances, and what you should watch. As a fan of professional wrestling, the only opinion that should matter is mine. And I'm not saying that my opinion should matter to you. My opinion should matter to me and what I like. I could give my opinion and say everything gets 5 stars and be done with it. But if I did that, would anyone want to read it? Absolutely not. Dave Meltzer, according to Tommy Dreamer's research, has given out 227 5+ star matches since he started the Wrestling Observer in 1982. Now, I would respect that opinion a little more if he decided to make it a top 100 matches that are must-see. But he won't. As listening to the Busted Open Masterclass podcast this morning, Bully Ray put it succinctly. Meltzer is working the fans, and most importantly, working the boys. And it's true. We are putting an awful lot into what Dave Meltzer says, but so does the performers. Mickey James also commented that performers will look at Meltzer before they listen to their road agents or legends. It's unbelievable that one man is basically controlling the industry. He is an inoperable cancer to the wrestling community and the profession, and there is nothing that anyone can do about it. That is, except us, the fans. Enjoy the ride. Stop taking the cringy stance that everyone who is an AEW or WWE or insert indie fan here is your enemy. We are all fans here. Let's start acting that way. To everyone who listens to Meltzer, lighten up and stop making Meltzer matter. Stop feeding his ego and making him money. Be your own judge on what is 5-star and what isn't. Now, I had built my channel off of, hey, a lot of people put a lot of stock into what Meltzer says. And when I came into wrestling YouTube, I didn't know there was a lot of people who were sort of anti-Meltzer. I didn't have any idea. All right. But at the time, a lot of the more famous podcasters, they basically parroted whatever Meltzer said, you know? And I know a lot of you don't feel that way, but we're here for my opinion. There's a thought of a lot of people. They liked the same crap that Meltzer liked. The same wrestlers. They had the same agenda. They talked the same stuff. If I listened to Brian Alvarez and then listened to, I'm not going to say any names, I would pretty much get the same opinion. And I would decide, that's when I realized, like, I'm in a bubble here. Nobody is thinking the same kind of thing I'm thinking. I didn't know that there were other people out there who disagreed with Meltzer, who said that Meltzer was saying was bunk. I kind of came to that conclusion on my own after following all of the matches that he said were really good and then finding myself bored with them. and saying to myself, like, he says this match is great, but I have no idea who this guy is. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know why this match is happening. I had to search it down on YouTube. There was no highlight packages. There was no video. There was no promos. There was nothing. It was just click this match and watch it. And now I'm supposed to just get super excited about a match between 2 guys or 4 guys, because most of the time it's tag team matches from like All Japan or something like that. And I have no idea who any of these people are. And without spending time reading the Observer and being, so I guess you could say, brainwashed into thinking that all of this stuff is really good, I just didn't know what I was looking at. I just didn't know why this got 5 stars. Was it a good technical match with like very tightly produced moves and all that kind of stuff? Usually, yes, it was. But was it anything that moved me, that made me decide that I'm going to jump ship over to this promotion? No. It's like sometimes I do like work rate stuff. I'll watch a Kenta Kobashi or a Misaharu Misawa match because I feel like it at that point in time. Other points in time, I want to watch Hulk Hogan Hulk up, punch a guy in the head, big boot leg drop, and have fun with that. And then there is as a person who does business analysis, and when it comes to, pro wrestling, you want to see what draws, what are the average person paying attention to. And that's when you start really realizing that what Meltzer likes is wrong. A lot of these people have no idea who Kazuchika Okada is. Will Ospreay can have 35-star matches. The average person has no earthly idea who he is. They would not think he is in the same business as Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, and Hulk Hogan. And it doesn't matter how many stars you give him. The average person would not put Will Ospreay in the same conversation with those people. And there wasn't a lot of people, at least not a lot of people with a lot of space in the wrestling sphere, I guess you could say, that was saying that kind of stuff. At least I didn't see them. I didn't know they existed. Now I'm glad I do know that they exist. And because now they're becoming a significant pushback against Meltzer, I can say, look, we need to push back against Meltzer and Alvarez and all of these guys who basically just jerk Meltzer off and parrot his opinions. We definitely should be pushing back. But we need to remember also, Meltzer didn't ask for this. It's just what happened. This has happened for the same reason it happened to Roger Ebert, because he became famous for giving his opinions. And people just started copycatting his format, copycatting his opinion. And it's not really his fault, but he does lean into it, which is his fault. Ultimately, though, it's become this incredible feedback loop where Tony Khan, who was notoriously an Observer subscriber before he got into the wrestling business, talked about how much he learned from the Observer. Meltzer, of course, his chest began to swell, and so did his head, and he started thinking, oh, Tony Khan's really smart, and Tony Khan knows a lot about the wrestling business, and all this kind of stuff. Then Tony Khan wins Promoter and Booker of the Year. Every year AEW has been in existence. Tony Khan even promotes winning Promoter and Booker of the Year on Dynamite at one point. And he's always let it be known that was his goal, was to win Booker and Promoter of the Year. And it has been this incredible feedback loop ever since AEW came along. And it's been the AEW influence, I believe, that has really set apart the wrestling media now. And now this is what making a lot of the wrestling media get people that, it's exposing them. Because now you have Meltzer taking pictures with the Young Bucks. They're naming moves after him. They're all from the same general area. PWG, which is a promotion that, of course, Meltzer has championed, was a promotion that the Young Bucks and Kevin Steen and El Generico, a.k.a. Sami Zayn, and a lot of Johnny Gargano, and a lot of these other people have come from and made, quote-unquote, their, I don't want to say fame, because they're not really famous, but that became sort of the thing. Then you started seeing how Meltzer would denigrate WWE product in terms of NXT, where they would call it a knockoff PWG. And you would have all this stuff happening. And while Meltzer didn't ask for all of this positive attention, he surely knows what to do with it. Quote, when it comes to matches, the most important opinion comes from the Wrestling Observer's Awards at the end of the year. And that's hundreds of people giving their opinions. There are years where I disagree vehemently with who won Match of the Year because of the easier access people have to some of the US stuff. However, the award is a much better reflection than my opinion of what a hardcore-ish wrestling audience thought of the matches when they initially happened. It's more important to look at what hundreds of people thought, and for that, you can look at the top 5 finishers for the match of the year during any year. That's a better consensus view than my individual star ratings as to what wrestling fans liked at that time. Now, he says that, but who dictates what's listed as a match of the year? Who gets qualified? Like, that audience is, I've used the word brainwashed already, but that audience is clearly already properly educated towards what Dave Meltzer wants. And this explains why AEW gets so many positive ratings. And Dave Shearer is going to back me up on this. He said in a Q&A in March, he says, quote, clearly Dave Meltzer has a standard for what he thinks a 5-star match is, and AEW gives him what he wants. I also think it's pretty clear that more than 3 years into the company's run, AEW's distant second place ranking shows that they don't deliver what the majority of the fans want. If they did, with all of their, quote, 5-star matches, they would be number 1, or at least giving WWE a run for their money. In other words, Meltzer claims you should listen to what the masses say is a classic match. The masses, he says, is the Wrestling Observer newsletter. What most of us have been saying, the average Joe, has been saying, hey, there's these thing called the audience, the casuals. Are you drawing them in with your storyline? Are they interested in your matches? Are they interested in what you're doing in this ring? Because if they are, then it seems that you're doing the right thing. But then there's that schism where, Meltzer will say, oh no, don't listen to me. I'm one man. But listen to all of my acolytes and the people who are listening, who gobble up and pay me for my opinion. Listen to them. They're just going to repeat what I say, but listen to them. Or at least repeat most of what I say. Not 100%. Nobody's 100%. But if you got a 96% on a test, you passed it. You're way beyond past it, right? You did very, very good. So if you were in the ballpark, you did very, very good. So you don't have to completely be a clone of Meltzer. But if you don't disagree with him largely, I say that you're pretty much, if you're like over 90% in the camp of Meltzer all the time, you're pretty much no different than he is. If you disagree about the color of somebody's hair or something like that, then that's not, I would refer to that as not being a significant difference between the two people's opinion. So Meltzer is saying, listen to what the hardcore-ish wrestling fans want. And that a good barometer that is his newsletter, which is only partially true, But until we change that, until we step in and say we don't care what Dave Meltzer gives 5 stars, this thing will continue forever. We will have guys, because eventually guys like Al Snow will die off. Eventually, a lot of the wrestlers who are older school, that was around in the 80s and in the early 90s, they're going to get old. They're going to stop caring. They're going to find other things to talk about. And Meltzer will still be there because he's an institution. So it's going to be up to us, the people who keep watching this stuff, that's going to end up making the change. And I don't think Meltzer asked for it. But ultimately, it's not about whether he asked for it at this point. It's about the fact that he's got it. And unless he's willing to put the scepter down and stop trying to control other people's opinions and override their opinions, then we're going to be sniping at each other forever and ever. And look, it's not personal, of course. Meltzer will just hand wave away everybody who disagrees with him as not being as educated about the business as he is. And then when somebody who is more educated will try to hand wave Meltzer, you'll get the, oh, but why? He's the Stephen A. Smith of wrestling. He's the Frank DeFord of wrestling, or whatever the hell, right? He's whatever, a big journalist in wrestling. And it's difficult, but it's the only way for us to do it, is to basically just say, Meltzer didn't ask for this, therefore we're not going to give it to him. We're not going to give him the floor. We're going to take the floor away. So thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.